Recording in progress.
Well, hello and welcome to my presentation on AI collaborations in higher education to improve critical thinking skills. I am Dr. LauraAnn Migliore, and I teach research classes, and I serve as a dissertation chair on many dissertation committees. I'm very interested in how to use generative AI and how it's advancing, because I can see where it can be very useful in the work that I do as a teacher and also a researcher. So I'm very interested in this, and glad you're able to watch this. For those of you that will watch it on playback version, this is being recorded, so anybody can then take a look at it afterwards. So all right, let's begin. I am going to be entering some people in the room here. Hello and welcome. As a professor, is how to use it to help improve critical thinking skills, because I work with a lot of students who are doing research, and research is all about critical thinking skills. So I'll just give an example, and that is with as artificial intelligence, using it as a virtual assistant that can provide some tailored advice. It's something I've been using with it, and I found it to be very useful in even finding scholarly peer-reviewed journal articles for my research. So that's kind of in a nutshell what I'm talking about here. And then when we get into generative AI, this is taking trained data sets, basically, where artificial intelligence is able to predict like the next word and the images, what these images are. And so it can produce text, imagery, video, and audio that can appear very lifelike and real. What it stands for, when you see the GPT, it stands for Generative Pre-trained Transformer. And basically what that says is these are just extensively trained models that are able to basically respond very quickly with whatever your inquiry is and what you're asking it to do. So I want to give you an example here. I asked it to tell me a joke. I said, what do you get? This is what I fed it. I said, what do you get when you cross AI with human collaboration? It came back and said, well, you get a group of robots arguing over who gets credit for the teamwork. So I thought, hey, that's pretty good, And then I asked it to tell me a story. I said, okay, I want to see if it can tell me a story. And I want to share this with you, because I was surprised at how quickly this went through. I asked it, this is exactly what I asked it to do. I said, tell me a story about a doctoral student named Brad who collaborates with generative AI as a virtual assistant that can provide him with tailored advice and feedback. And I specifically said the subject is how artificial intelligence is impacting teenagers in terms of how they can tell the difference between a real relationship and an artificial relationship, and how they can tell the difference between reality and the imitation of reality. And then I told it, I said, include conflict and how Brad is going to overcome the conflict to write a well-written proposal for research. I asked it to give me a title for this story. It came back with this. It said the title should be Exploring the Impact of AI on Teenagers' Perceptions of Reality and Relationships, Brad's Journey as a Doctoral Student. And this was generated in less than 10 seconds, 362 words. And I'm going to just listen to this story. This is a pretty good story. It says, Brad was a doctoral student focusing on the intersection of technology and psychology. His goal was to study how artificial intelligence impacted teenagers' perceptions of reality and relationships. Brad's research had been going well until one day his academic advisors suggested that he incorporate generative AI into his study. At first, Brad was hesitant. He had never worked with AI before, and so he wasn't sure how to proceed. However, with the help of a virtual assistant, he began to collaborate with an AI system, and the AI system provided him with tailored advice and feedback on how his research, allowing him to explore new venues and develop new ideas. But as Brad delved deeper into his research, he began to realize that not everybody was excited about the possibilities of AI as he was. There were concerns that teenagers may not be able to tell the difference between real relationships and artificial ones. Some feared that AI might create a world where people could not differentiate between reality and imitation. Despite these concerns, Brad was determined to complete his research. He put in long hours and conducted numerous experiments, always with his virtual assistant by his side as he tried to piece together his findings and complete his proposal. Brad faced conflicts from members of his committee who were very skeptical about his methods. To overcome these methods, Brad reached out to the experts in the field for advice and sought out research studies that he could back up his findings. He conducted several more experiments, adjusted his approach each time to accommodate the concerns of his committee members. Finally, with the help of his virtual assistant and his own perseverance, Brad was able to write a well-written proposal that addressed, let me just admit some more people in here, that addressed, where did I go? His concerns, and it was accepted by his committee. So Brad's research ultimately proved that teenagers could tell the difference between real relationships and artificial ones. His findings also showed that AI could be used as a tool to help people distinguish between reality and imitation. Brad's work had a significant impact on the field of psychology and paved the way for further research on the impact of AI on human perceptions. So I thought that was pretty good. And for those of you who just joined a little bit late, I was just reading a 360-word story that was generated by AI in less than 10 seconds when I asked it with this instructional prompt. So I just wanted to give some examples of what generative AI is and how it can be used. And in terms of the higher education industry for concerns and opportunities, I mean, there are many concerns. And of course, the most obvious is academic integrity, cheating on tests, papers that are generated, written by AI, as I showed you what it can do. But, some of the challenges that the education industry has is this need to adapt curriculum content and learning outcomes for relevant workplace skills. There is a huge change in workforce needs that are happening right now. We know that humans and machines are working together more than ever with the different algorithms and automation of processes. There's also, and this was in 2022, but an estimate of 75 million jobs that may no longer be relevant, but 130 million jobs that would need to meet this new workforce paradigm of humans and machines working together. So there is opportunity. At the same time, we've got problems and concerns. My perspective on this is fear is not an option. We have to, this is a tool, and my perspective is use it to be able to see what we can do, that it's going to improve student learning outcomes, improve critical thinking. We should overcome it with creativity and innovation. And I always like to embrace a pioneering spirit to explore and discover brave new territories for AI collaborations in transdisciplinary communications. So I want to share something with you. There is a paper that was written by Dr. Turwish. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. He did some amazing, just firsthand research on his own. And he asked it a question. He said, would the ChatGPT-3 get a Wharton MBA? The answer is yes, it would. But the grade would be somewhere between a B and a B minus. What he did is he experimented with the operations management course and basically fed the final exam test to ChatGPT, which gave him the answers. He found, and in his paper, it gives beautiful example. I mean, you read it, you go, wow, this is a great example. So some of the questions, they got A+, A+ answer. But there were some examples where it had trouble with math calculations. It also showed improvement when it was given a hint. And so I'm going to just give you some examples of that. It did require, and this is what he found, is that it required human energy to think differently in the way that we asked it the question. And I know myself, in playing around with the Chat GPT, it's been challenging me to think deeper and to think in other ways to push it so I can get the response and the details that I'm looking for. So that's exactly what he found as well. He would find different ways to ask it a question or direct it in a specific direction so that he could get more information back from it. So one of the examples, and this is where it just didn't perform very well, but as it continues to grow and advance, we can kind of see where it will get better at it. But there was one of the problems had to do with a complex manufacturing process where there were shared resources and multiple products in that thing. Well, the AI had trouble with the parameters and the details of that particular question, and it answered it incorrectly. But when Professor T had given it the input, it was able then to distinguish between two types of products. So that's where the collaboration part came in. There was another example where it was asked to calculate average wait time for voters, and it did not answer correctly. It was incorrect. So he said, okay, apply queuing analysis. And so when he gave it that instruction, it did it correctly, okay? But there was another part of that particular thing where when it had to do the math to crunch the numbers, it actually got it wrong. So then you scratch your head and go, wow, you know what? It should have got it right. But that just goes to show that these models still need to they're not perfect. They still have to go through the training process. And as time goes on and there's more feedback, the feedback we give it with this AI collaborations, humans and machines, the better it will get. Okay, so those were just a couple of insights from his work. But here were the actionable insights that I took away as I was looking at this, is that these examples do demonstrate that the current state of AI is imperfect, but the opportunity is for the collaboration in transdisciplinary communications. It's an opportunity to apply critical thinking. And that's something that's very important to me as a professor, because all of my students have to think very deeply about the research that they're doing. And it's not easy. And so they got to get deeper into the details. So I can see where this would be very useful in helping them. So having them evaluate the AI output rather than become overly reliant on it. They have to be able to ask the question, does this make sense? Because some of it just may be nonsense. So that's going to be very important. And then, of course, in my feedback, I'm always emphasizing, tell me about the theory, tell me how it works and how this particular thing plays out in practice. So this is where, as you're collaborating with this type of a tool, I would expect my graduate students to be able to identify the theory and the practice based on whatever the AI is putting out there, that it should be justified in terms of the content of what the AI output is and also the context of what it's being asked. So those are just some of the actionable insights that I wanted to share. And then I want to take you to where it's going. This next evolution in advancing artificial intelligence. We know that the Chat GPT-4 has been released. And it can do some amazing stuff with pulling together images and audio and some of the voice cloning that is there. I mean, it just goes on. It's just amazing, this trajectory of how it impacts transdisciplinary communications. It really does exceed our wildest expectations. So we have to be cautious, but we have to also be very prudent. So I'm very much supportive and very strong about looking at the ethical considerations of this and being able to make sure that it's useful and it's being applied in the right way. So it's not to hurt, to do no harm. That's a major thing we do in research, is making sure that we're not doing any harm. So as AI advances, when you think about the sensor technologies and just the computing power and the interconnectivity of all things networked right around the globe, it becomes pretty amazing what can be done. And so we have this thing called human in the loop systems with cyber-physical systems, and where the sensors are collecting the data from real world phenomena. This data then feeds the machine and deep learning models to predict outcomes, and then it can automatically change something in the physical world. So for example, the most common right now today is, like, I have a smart home, and so it's regulated by data. And so my heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system, certain sensors capture it, and then my indoor temperature is regulated. So that's just one example. But I want to give you something that I came across that it's pretty exciting. And I want you just for a moment, imagine a future where the stress level of graduate students could be allayed through an integrated human in the loop cyber-physical system platform. And this is where we enter into ISABELA. ISABELA is a long acronym. It actually means Internet of Things, that's the I, student for the S, advisor for the A, and BEST, B-E, and lifestyle analyzer. That is ISABELA. What it is, it's an aware advisor system, and it's a human in the loop advisor system. It integrates with sensor technology. And it does just that, what I was explaining. It captures data, it gathers social media data from Facebook and Twitter, and then it uses natural language processing techniques to identify moods, behaviors, mental states. And it's all associated in the predictive model of how that impacts academic performance. So it's looking at how to predict their healthy lifestyles and habits, and how that will predict either failure or success for their academics. And there's two outcomes for this particular model in this study that I'm talking about right now. And that is that if ISABELA sees failure as the predictive outcome, then what it will do is it will improve, it will give actions like, here's some things that you should do. It acts more like a coach to help improve your academic performance. Whereas if the prediction is success, then it's going to provide encouragement and other techniques and things that the student can do to improve their learning outcome. And so just to continue on with this study, is that ISABELA was also linked with an online social network using a mobile application. And the data that was captured was, like I said, fed the machine learning models. But here's what it was looking at. It was looking at sleep detection. The sensors were picking up whether they were sleeping or not sleeping, whether the sleep quality was restless or calm, whether their level of sociability, and there were some other things that determined whether it was a low level or high level of sociability. And then, of course, for the data science algorithms, the things under the hood that make all this stuff happen with the output, the random forest algorithm showed the highest accuracy of 0.906. And there were different structures used in the artificial neural network, which they had hidden layers, up to 20 hidden layers in this particular neural network, and various decision tree architectures, for there as well, where it showed different levels of the tree and how far it went down. The research participants, it was a 4-week study, and they had 10 students from the University of Cambrai in Portugal and 30 students from Ecuador. So it was a pretty interesting study. This study then went on. They learned from it. They said, how do we improve it? And it was really on the ethics. And so that's another important point I want to bring forth, is ethics, and the fact that privacy and security are paramount when we're talking about this, and we should never lose sight of this. So what they did to improve this before they took it and applied ISABELA to a smart city application, which was called Green Bear, is they did some random identifiers at the time of registration. They did anonymous data to make sure that the personal identifiers were not linked to the random identifier. And then there were incentives. So they even went so far as to make sure that the incentives, which used a different application, mobile application, could not be tracked or traceable to the personal identification. So those are some things that need to be put in place. And then as far as the design, really applying critical thinking and looking at how do we design this so that ethics are built into the system itself and the way that we do AI collaborations, so we can mitigate these risks and not let others exploit the algorithms for their own self-serving purposes. Weights and biases that are applied in the artificial neural network also, they need to be understood and they need to be adjusted so that they can facilitate ethical outcomes. And that's where understanding how things work under the hood are so important. That there's good collaboration with the data science teams, data engineering, and everybody that's involved in this. And then as far as this smart city scenario, which is called Green Bear, the people that participated in it were actually citizens of that particular town in Portugal, and they had wearable sensors, so the sensibles were on their physical body. They were using like mobile applications with their phone, and they would, depending on what they did in the city, there are other sensors around that would pick up and interact and communicate. So it's just a fascinating study that was done. But again, the ethics in transdisciplinary communication is imperative to gain trust. And then when you have trust, now you can collaborate in a better fashion so that it can be improved for smart city designs and sustainable living. So I just watch my time here because I want to leave some time for discussion. I'm going to just quickly finish up, and I want to open it up for any questions that you may have. The literature review is another application where this topic on long COVID was not really there. So they applied some machine learning approaches, and now it resulted in 9,000 articles so people can find the literature collection on that. There were some, with academics and workplace, AI collaboration can be used in a way to improve critical thinking. The speed of AI produces efficiencies gained in the time saved. So that's where you can improve that collaboration and really evaluate the output that's coming there and sort of use it in a way to make sure that things are the best decision is being made. And then we have an example, one of my favorites. It kind of gives a reflection of where we are today. But back in the 1960s, Katherine Johnson, she identified Euler's method for calculating the loss, which gets into the calculating the loss gradient that we use in artificial neural networks today that weren't around back then. And it's just amazing the connection from the past to where we are today and how that collaboration with AI can break through where you get a mental block within a team. And so she was kind of like that instrumental person that broke the mental block of that team to determine how to calculate changes in velocity and location with Apollo 11. So that was the example I was using there. And so then this is just the summary. There's a lot of good things, but like I said, caution with where we're going with this, and that ethics is paramount, privacy and security and just how it's being used. So with that, I have my reference list here, and I'm happy to share this presentation with anybody that would request it. Right here is my email address. So please feel free to reach out to me. You can send an email and I will respond, and look forward to carrying on conversations and collaborations with who's ever interested. So with that, I open it up. If you would like to ask me a question, please do.